Hello, and welcome to another stream. So today we will build something that on the first look looks rather simple, like a simple shopping list application. But I have some crazy ideas, so let's dive right in. First of all, let's start with drawing, so you have some idea what I want to build. Like it's basically pretty much the same that what we built the last time. Like the basic concept is like a simple to-do app, but this time for a shopping list. And it is a little different than a to-do app. We have items on our shopping list, and those are the items we want to buy. So basically, those are the active items. And then we want to be able to click on one of those items, and then it's in the list of like inactive items, like the items we already bought, but we already have in our cart, for example, when we are in the shop. But they're ready to be enabled again as soon as we go on the next shopping trip. So how do I draw this? Like, let's do a line. So, like that, beneath that line are all our items that we already have in our shopping cart or that we do not need right now. So a very simple concept, and at the top we maybe have, or at the bottom maybe, at the bottom we have an input field where we can enter a new item, and then we have a button to edit. So very simple, very straightforward, but now it gets interesting. So like a shopping list application is more useful when it can be used by different people. Like you have access to the same list for multiple people, like you and your roommate, for example, or you and your wife and your children all can add items to the same shopping list. So we have one instance, and yeah, everybody can add new items. And yeah, I think that sounds rather straightforward. Like we could do this by having a backend with a database, and we create an account, and everybody can add item, or everybody who has access to this account can add new items. So this would be one way to solve it, and it would be in one regard, it would be a rather simple implementation. But what I have in mind is that there is a decentralized shopping list. So instead of having a server, like here, so typically we would have an API, and this API goes to like a database, and then we sync our items with this API, and this API stores them in the database, and then different people all have access to the same shopping list, basically. So all of those different people can add their own items and yeah, go on a shopping trip and deactivate the items and so on. This would one way to solve it, but I want to decentralize it. So basically, I want to remove those. But yeah, how can we do this? And there is an interesting thing that we can use called WebRTC. Like typically, WebRTC is used for all the video conferencing tools and so on, and for chat applications. But I think we can also use it for something like this. So with WebRTC, it would work something like the following. Do we have some graphics in here? I'm looking for a smartphone or something like that. But yeah, we don't have smartphones. Just imagine this is the smartphone of actor 1, and this is the smartphone of actor 2. And instead of having a server in between, which syncs those two devices. We want to sync them like in a peer-to-peer way. So those two devices sync directly with each other. And basically with WebRTC, we can do this, but if you think about it, how does this device know about the other device? So if this guy wants to, or if this guy adds some item to the list on their device, then how does this device know that it has to sync this info with the other device? So how does it know about the other device? And typically, how it is done in chat applications or meeting or Google Meet or something like that. Oh, second, I want to write. So how it is done with traditionally is that you again have a backend, and then this device calls the backend and asks for all the other devices it has to sync with, and then the backend and this device is registered at the backend as well. So the backend knows about this device and the backend knows about that device, and so the backend can tell this device here that it has to sync with the other device. So this is how it's done traditionally, but I want to remove it completely. So I want to be able to synchronize two devices without any server in between. And it's not entirely possible, too much I have to say, because we need, so that those two, so in order to make those two communicate, the two devices need to know some stuff about the network connection of the other one. So basically like the IP address is the most basic one, and a lot of other stuff. I'm not very, or I don't know a lot about it. I don't know almost nothing about it. I only know that those two devices need to know some stuff about the network connectivity of the other device. And the device itself doesn't really know all of that, but there's something like a stun server, it is called. I have no idea what this means. As I said, I don't know a lot about it. I just know the very, very basics. And this stun server, like, it doesn't matter if it's the same. So the devices can use different stun servers. So the stun server has no state. So that it's not like in the previous model where the device registered with the server, but the stun server is just a simple service that tells this device a couple of things about its network connectivity. So this device calls the stun server, and this device calls maybe the same stun server, but maybe also another stun server, doesn't matter. Like I said, it's stateless and it returns just some information about the network connectivity of this device. And now, when this device knows about the network connectivity, we need to somehow send this info to the other device. And this device must do the same, but in the opposite direction. And my idea is that we do this via the URL. So like we have a URL param, like it's called description equals, and then a base 64 encoded string with all the information they need. So if those two people want to share a single shopping list application, they get the link. So like somebody has to start this process. So like, let's say actor 1 starts this. So actor 1 gets a link, and then they send it to actor 2 with via email or via instant messaging, doesn't matter. Like they just need to send the information they get from the stun server to the actor, and they can do this by simply copying the URL they get from our application. And then the other one has to open this URL. And then the other one already knows about this one, but this one still doesn't know about the other one. So then this actor 2 has to send again a link to actor 1, and then actor 1 opens the link they get from actor 2, and then both devices know about each other, and then we can synchronize this. So much about the basic idea. I don't know how far we get today. I guess today we will do the straightforward simple stuff, like making this very simple functionality work. But in one of the next streams, we will take a look at this WebRTC stuff, and I think it's very interesting. Yeah, and also what also will be very interesting is the syncing of the items in here. Like, I'm not quite sure yet how we do it, but yeah, I want to try out the concept that's named event sourcing. It's basically you store like commands in some database, or in our case, we will use the local storage. And then it doesn't matter in which order you execute those commands. But yeah, that's probably a matter of some of the future streams. But yeah, let's start with some code. I hope that's somewhat clear. If you have any questions, just ask. I see there are a couple of people in the chat right now, so hello to you. And yeah, if something is unclear, then just ask. Like, I guess this WebRTC stuff is somewhat foreign, and I didn't explain it well, but yeah, we'll see. We'll see it in one of the next streams. So, like I said, what we built today is pretty much the same what we were building in one of the previous streams, but maybe you didn't see it. So I explain a little bit about the basic setup. Let's open the file tree. Close this. So the basic setup is a Vue application. So Vue.js and Vue as the build tool. And in here we have two important folders. Like, one of them is the test folder. And inside the test folder, we have some stuff for Cypress, and we have some stuff for Jest. And then we have our specification files, so our test files. And yeah, there's some other stuff, but I won't go into all the details today because I guess it's too much otherwise. So in here, we will have all our acceptance tests, or some call them integration tests. I will call them acceptance tests. And what I mean by them is, what I mean with that term is that those are the tests we execute like a real user would use our application. So we have a browser running, but yeah, at least a simulated browser. And yeah, and we open pages instead of loading components. So those are our tests that test the application like a real user would use our application. And you might think that we use Cypress for those tests exclusively and Jest for unit tests, but that's not the case in this setup, because with this setup we can run our test files, our tests, either with Jest or with Cypress. So if we run them with Jest, they don't run in a real browser, but with the virtual DOM. But we can still click on stuff and do everything the same like we would do with Cypress. And if we run them in Cypress, they run in a real browser, like you're used to if you know Cypress. But we can run the same tests in both, so we don't have to decide, do we want to write a test to run with Jest and a test to run with Cypress, but our tests are written in a way that we can execute them in both, like we want. So if we want to check if everything works in a real browser, then we can run them with Cypress. And if we just want to see if our basic implementation works, we can run them in Jest. And so we have the best of both worlds. With Jest, we get very fast feedback, so very, very fast feedback. And with Cypress, we get a little bit of a slower feedback, but we get the confidence that it works in a real browser as well, and not only in a simulated one, like it's the case with Jest. And oh, I'm falling back to German. Genau is all right, basically. And so how it looks is that in our tests, we don't use Cypress methods or Jest specific methods directly, but we have a driver, and this driver has some methods, and those methods or this driver implementation can be swapped. We have a driver for Cypress and a driver for Jest, but they have both the same methods. But in our tests, we always use this generic driver, and so we can run our tests in both test runners, either Cypress or Jest. Yeah, and then we have a test setup with a lot of decoupling going on. So we decouple our tests from the implementation of the components. We decouple, and with the driver system, we decouple the tests from the test framework, and we decouple. What did I say? We decouple from the concrete implementation and also from technicalities, like we don't assume that there is some CSS selector or something like that. It's all hidden behind a DSL. I will explain this a little later, I think. Okay, so this is basically how we write tests. So the important thing is we can run our tests. We can run the same tests in either Cypress or Jest. And if we want to swap our test framework, we could even add another driver for something like Test Cafe or whatever other test frameworks there are out there. So we are not bound to any specific test runner with this system. And like I said, here are our general specifications that test the system from the point of view of a real user that uses the real application. So much for the tests. And then we have the source directory. And inside the source directory is all of the stuff we need for our Vue application. Like we have the main file and so on. And routes for the routes. Oh, those are only the basic names for the routes. But we use the router, the Vue router. We have a single route for our page home and the app component and so on. So like default Vue application stuff. And then I always use my default directory structure where I use modules. And modules are basically the different building blocks or the different parts of an application. Like a big application, we maybe have like dozens, or maybe even in a very big application, we maybe even have hundreds of modules, but typically maybe like around 6 to like 60. And a module is, for example, you have one module concerned with all the user authentication stuff. So like with components for registering a new user and showing the user their the profile information and so on. And then you might have, if you build an e-commerce site, you might have a module for the checkout process, and you might have a separate module for the product listings and showing product pages and so on. So those are the modules. In our simple application, we only have a shopping list module, and this is the only module we have in this case. And in components are all our generic components, like in this case, our page components and some layout components and stuff like that. And inside of a module, we have, again, components that are specific to this module. Like in this case, I have an empty shopping list component just to get started. And I also have some stuff prepared for testing, but we will look into this later. Okay, so let's remind ourselves real quick what we want to build. So I go back to the drawing again. So we want to build a list of shopping list items with active items and inactive items, and we want to be able to add new item. So let's do this. Let's start with showing the list of items. Oh, I think I have to restart my Visual Studio Code real quick. Yeah, sorry for that. I don't know what it is. So sometimes it just breaks for some reason. And then it doesn't do ESLint stuff anymore and such things. So how did I call it? Shopping list. Okay. See if it works now. Yeah, looks better. You see, it's the ESLint stuff did its auto fix thing. So here we see on the right our test runner. So I start this again so you can see it. I ran npx just watch all, so we watch all our specification files, but for now we only have one. And I also already added a test like should show all of my shopping list items. And there we have like a prepare function, and the prepare function is basically to set up all the mocking stuff. So when you would typically mock an API request or something else, there is our prepare function which does that. And then with go to shopping list, we go to the page where the shopping list is located, and then we assert that we see 3 items. Because we prepare a case where a shopping list already exists. And how we do this is by having a precondition. So this is basically our abstraction layer around the mocking system. And in our precondition, we set items inside of the local storage. So inside of the local storage, we set a shopping list key, and here we set the shopping list default data, and the shopping list default data looks something like that. So this is the data structure for our shopping list. We have, in this case, 3 items that are stored in the local storage already, and we want to display them in the shopping list. Okay, so we already have prepared the shopping list component, and inside of that, we can now write our code. Let's make a Vue for loop and say we have an item. In items, we need a key. And the key, we can use the ID for the key. And for now, we simply render the item name in here. Okay, so now we have to load the item somehow. And in this case, we will do it right here. So we're working by applying the test-driven development approach. And what this means is that we write the test first. So like you saw, here we have the test. And like you can see here, the test fails. And that means now we need to write the implementation and make the test succeed. And as soon as the test succeeds, we want to do a refactoring round, or at least one refactoring round. So the basic principle is red, green, refactor. So those are the 3 phases in a TDD workflow. And now we are in the red phase. So we have a failing test, a red test. Now we want to go to the green phase where we get the succeeding test. And then we want to do some refactoring and hope that we stay in the green phase, basically. Okay, so in here, let's think how we do it. I think, yeah, let's do it the most straightforward way we can. And this would be basically like saying we have items here and we get those directly from the local storage. So we can refactor this later. So let's just make it work for now. I think I just called it shopping list like that. So by any luck, this would already work, but it doesn't. Okay, yeah. Because we get a string here, but as we see it, it can iterate the string. So basically, I think item name are now the single characters of the string, I guess. But, oh no, it's empty, actually. Okay, because the character string doesn't have a name property. Okay, but we can do JSON parse. Let's see. Test type script complaints here. Okay, yeah. So in the test, we already prepared something for a later stage because I just copied the to-do project and there were a couple of steps already created. And now we can see here that it basically is working, but it complains that it can't find a test ID called shopping list active or something like that. And that's because in the assert item visible, we look for, first of all, the text, the item name. So basically item 1 and item 2 and so on. So we look for those texts, but we look for those texts within a certain test ID. This test ID is called active items. So yeah, I said we want to solve it the most straightforward way. So the test ID in my setup is a data QA attribute. And in here, what did we choose for the test ID? Active items. In here, we declare the active items test ID. And hopefully this should work now. Yeah. So now we have our first succeeding test. But yeah, as I said, now we are in the refactoring phase. So we were in the red phase. Now we're in the green phase. But our code is really not very future-proof, I want to say, because we simply get the items directly from the local storage, and also there is this problem here that we always have to use this test ID up right here, but I guess the test ID we leave it in until we write the next test. But let's rewrite this part. What I want to have is like a service, so we are independent of the actual database systems layer, because now in our component itself, we assume that's the local storage, but we might change it to an API or something like that at a later point, and then we have to touch every component where we get the data directly from the local storage, so we shouldn't do that. So let's call it like get list from, and I guess we create a directory for services in here and call it list service like that. And we also can create a type for our items. Let's also import the type in here, but yeah, we have to create those, of course. And we can already just write the service itself. So let's create a new directory, and the shopping list service itself. Oh, I can type service.ts. And in here we export, let's write it like that function get list, and return it like that. And we can move this one in call it storage key, for example, that, and use this one in here. So, and we also want to make it async, so we are more flexible in the future. If we always assume that it's async, then we can change it to a fetch API or anything we like. Okay. And then we also want to export the type. And the type is item equals, And we have an ID, I think. It's a string and the name. And for now, we only have those two. Then we can specify in here that we let's make TypeScript happy here first. So does it actually complain about? I guess that it can be null or something like that. I disabled for streaming. I disabled the pop-ups because sometimes they are annoying, but they make programming a little bit harder. No, but I assume it's because it's null. So let's create storage, or let's create data raw variable here. Do it like that, and if not data raw, return null, or maybe an empty array. I guess an empty array is nicer. Yeah, empty array is sure is nicer. And then we can in here can do it like that. And now TypeScript is happy as well. Okay, so if there are no data, we return an empty array. Otherwise, we return JSON parse. And now we can say that this method returns a promise of promise of items. A promise with an array of items. Okay. And now when we go back to our shopping list, let's read those. Oh, because we don't use it right now. Okay. In here, we now create a ref for our items because we need to store them somewhere when we don't directly pass them from local storage right here. So let's create a ref. And this is a ref of an array of items. Again, starting with an empty array. And then we do a fetching logic inside the self-executing function. In here, we can say items value equals await. And then get list. Like that. Okay. And yeah, here we run the items. Good. Hope this works. Yeah, still works. So this was the refactoring phase, and it's still everything is green. And the nice thing about this approach is now we are independent. If this is an API request or something else, doesn't matter in here. We can change the get list implementation whenever we want. Okay, so basically, if we look back at our drawing, we have our application in here. We can see it works as well. And we basically have this part here. We have all our items that were added at some point. Next thing is we want to separate the items that are active from those that are inactive. So if we click one of those items, we want to move them in an area below. And also if we click one of the items in the area below, we want to move it back up. Okay, and how we can do that? We start with a new test. So it should show, it should move the item. It should move an active item to, or it should make an item inactive when it is clicked. Something like that. Maybe, yeah, we could make this description a little nicer, but it's good enough. In this case, we again assume we get a shopping list exists. We go to the shopping list page, and now we assert. I already prepared an assertion for that case in our DSL file. So in this DSL file is the actual implementation of those steps we saw in the test earlier. So first of all, we want to add an item to the active ones. So we want to do something like that, add item, and then we need to write an item name. So let's say we want to add the first item to the list of active items. There is something missing. Oh, we need to import it. Okay, so on this test, we add the item 1 to the list of active items. And now we want to also check if it really is shown in the list of active items. And we also already have a step in here for that. So we have the assert inactive items visible step. So we can use that one. And in here, we check if now item 1 is actually in the list of inactive items. We need to import this one as well. Okay, so let's open our test again, and we see now our first test still succeeds because we didn't change anything here. But the new one we just added fails again. So we are now in the red phase again. And now we have to make some bigger changes. I guess we do it the following way. We create another component, which is basically the wrapper component in here, like shopping list app, for example. I think that's pretty much the same way we did it in the last stream. And we reuse the shopping list for both. So in the shopping list app, we if in here render 2 times the shopping list. And there are now multiple. So let's add some headlines here. First of all, let's call this rain hour. The stream will be saved, and I will also upload it to YouTube, so you can watch it on YouTube later. You're welcome. So here we have the active items. Let's call them active items for now. And in the real app, we need a little fancier name, I guess. And there we have the inactive items, and we use the same shopping list component for both. And now we somehow need to tell the shopping list component that it only should render either the active items or the inactive items. And we could do it with something like a property and call it maybe filter and make it something like a active or something like that. Could do it that way. And then inside of our shopping list component, we could filter the values we get from getList. That would be a possibility. But what I like to do in this case, I want to have the data fetching logic at the outermost component possible. So I don't want to do a lot of data fetching inside of a lot of different components, but I want to have most of the data fetching logic, in the best case, in a single component or in as few components as possible. So what I want to do is that we add a new property to the shopping list, but it's not the filter or something like that, but we add like an items property, and then we pass in here the active items, and here we pass the inactive items. Because now we can do the data fetching logic in this shopping list app, and this shopping list app is basically the outermost component. Shopping list app component is the outermost component in our application. Okay, and because we copied the shopping list component, we already have the data fetching logic in here. just need to rename it. Now we have the items, and now we can return or property naming. Let's do it that way: items active and items active, like that. Okay, so we need to return them here. I think it's relatively straightforward. We can, oh no, it's not that straightforward. We need to, I mean, yeah, it's straightforward, but it's not as straightforward as I thought it would be. We need to have computed properties in here. So let's create an items active computed property like that. Okay. And this one returns, yeah, I guess we don't need those. We can simply do the filtering in here. So this one returns items, value, filter, and let's look at our data structure. In here we see we have the ID, the name, and the state field. So first of all, let's go back to our service and add the state in here as well. State, also a string. And now go to our component in here. We have now the filter method, and here we get the item. And now for the active, what did I call the state? Active. So filter item, and we return every item which state as a value of active, something like that. Place here. And for the inactive, we do the same, but in the opposite direction, basically. Like, yeah, let's call the state inactive, something like that. So items active, items inactive, we return them here. Okay. Now we also need to import the component. Import shopping list. Somehow, I don't know why there is shopping list view. What happens when I click it? I mean, I don't want to call it view. I want to just call it shopping list. Strange. Okay. We import the shopping list, and in here we have components. And we add the shopping list in here. Okay, so now we need to change our shopping list component to accept the property like that. So let's go back to the shopping list component. We can, I think we can remove this altogether. We need the type though, and here we need a drop type, I think. Yeah, let's do it that way and define the props in here. So we need a prop for items. And we can make it required, I think. And the type is of prop type. How do we need to do it like that? Oh no, it's like, is it, how does it work again? Look it up. Use prop types, yes. Oh yeah, S, yeah. Now I know it again. Okay, it's array S prop type, like that. Yeah, I keep forgetting this syntax. Okay, so now we accept the items. This looks fine, and the first test should still work right now. We'll grab items. Did I name it differently? Looks good, actually. What's the problem here? Not quite sure. Let's see again. Props items required true. Shopping list. What's going on here? Oops. In my opinion, it should work, but obviously the compiler thinks differently. Good. What is when we change this up to default? Like that. But probably only removing the error message, but yeah, still doesn't work. So I'm not, okay. I'm stupid. I'm very stupid. Let's change it back. Yeah, I keep making this mistake. Like we created a new component, obviously, so we need to also render this new component and not the old one. So in here, we now render the shopping list app like that. So now I hope this works. Yeah. So the first test succeeds again, but the second does still not, because we only did the first half of the refactoring. So we prepared basically the basic functionality that we now are able to render two different instances of our shopping list by loading the data outside of the shopping list and doing some filtering in here. But the functionality to click on one of those items to move them into the other, or to mark them as active or inactive, is not yet implemented. And first of all, we now need to move this data QA property, because this shopping list component can render both active and inactive. So this data QA property is not correct anymore. Now we need the active items property, and down here we need the inactive items data QA or test ID property, like that. Okay, so this is the first step, and now for moving the items, for actually moving the items. Let's add a button here, and this button should emit an event when clicking it. How do we call it? How do we call the event? Something like toggle state, something like that. Maybe, yeah, would be good. And as a value, we send the item ID, I guess. So now we can click it, and now we need to handle the click event. So inside of the shopping list app component, we now add an event listener for the, I already forgot how I called it, for the toggle state. What do you call it? Toggle state. Oh my god. Toggle state equals. And now I guess how do we do it? I think I want to use the service, but also I don't want to have a toggle state method in the service. I think we create a toggle state method in here, and then in the service we create a generic update, item method, I guess. So let's see. Yeah, let's create a method in here. Let's call it toggle state equals function. And in here, we get the ID, item ID. And in here, let's assume from our shopping list service, we get an update method. And yeah, let's call it in here the update, and we update the item with the given ID like that, and with some data. And now the state equals, and now we need to know the state it has right now, or maybe, yeah, maybe let's do it a little bit differently. Let's say set active item ID, and then we just say state active, and create a set inactive. It's easier that way. So let's do the most simple way, I guess. Inactive, because up here we actually know what state it should get. So in here we can say set active, and down here, I mean, yeah, let's don't implement it right now because we don't have a test for it. So wait with the implementation until we have the test. Comment this out for now. Set active, return it in here. And now we have to implement this update method. So export a new async function, update, and this returns promise void, and we get the ID in here and the data. Okay. So yes, the easiest way to do it is like in here we call the get list. So let's say let list equals await get list. And now we have, I mean, the implementation would be quite different if this would be API calls, for example, but yeah, in this case, it's local storage, and inside of this service file, we're allowed to know about all the stuff that's related to the local storage part. And in this case, we can't simply update an item directly in the local storage like we would be able to do in a database or with an API, but we always have to load older items. But it's okay for a simple app like ours. It should be fine. So we get the list right here, and then we need to search for the item with the ID. So let's say item current or something like that, or just item equals list find. Oh, let's rename it because then we can use item in here. List find item ID equals ID. Okay, so now we have the item current, and yeah, we should implement some error handling here. So in case we can't find the item current, but yeah, for now, I don't care. We can improve this later. So for now, we assume we always use this update method correctly, and there always is an item with this ID. In a real world code base, I wouldn't like this at all because yeah, we should always have decent error handling, of course, but in this case, yeah, we're just building a very simple application and we want to get started quickly and don't overdo it on details in the first run. So now we have the item current. Not sure what there is to complain. Let me see. I guess I need to enable the hints again. It's just too hard. So what I did is I disabled the hover styles because when recording videos and stuff, they are pretty annoying. They pop up, but it's just because the blank line. Yeah, okay. Yeah, but it's much easier to code with those. But as you can imagine, when recording a video or even when streaming, it's sometimes annoying. That's why I disabled them. Okay, so and now we modify the item current, and we simply change the state. Yeah, thank you for helping, but you're actually not helping. Or we do it differently. Yeah, we can. And for the purists out there, we can do it in a way that we don't have to modify this object, although in this case it wouldn't matter because it's local state and we could just override the properties of this object just fine. But yeah, let's do it differently. Let's create the item, the new item. Let's call it item new actually. Be very precise, and this one is like the item current, and then we override all no props from data. And then we get our new item. And yeah, now we need to update the local storage. Let's do it in here. Let's do it in here. Let's say local storage set item, storage key, and then the list, but we need to replace the old item with the new item. How do we do this? I did this. Yeah, we can just say list map, get the item again, and then we do some logic in here. If this is probably a little dirty, but whatever. If item ID equals ID, then we return the item new. And otherwise, in the default case, we just return the item again. So what's the problem in here? Type any string. Not quite sure. What's the problem here? Like list is an array, and we map over the array. Let's remove it already. Okay, yeah. Because of course we have to JSON stringify this one. Then it should work. Just a linting problem. There, TypeScript wants a type, but you can't have everything TypeScript. No types for you in this case. So now we have our update function. We import it here. We update the state. Let's save this one. Does this already work? No. Update is not a function. That's not true. Oh, that's true. Update. There was a typo. Missing D. Okay. Okay. So the problem is the following. We update it in the local storage, but this doesn't update our items array. So we need to solve this somehow. So what we can do is that I guess the most straightforward way, so we could do some magic that we update the items in here by changing this item's ref directly. But I think it's a lot easier if we do it the following way. If we make this async and then do it like that. Because when we do it like that, we don't have to write any custom code again. Still doesn't work. Why not? Item 1, item 1. This could. Okay. But the first one still works. So maybe our update method doesn't work correctly. Yeah, that's the only. Or that what is stuff doesn't work correctly. Those are our two options. So we add a console log. So console log, let's log our item ID and see if this setActive method is actually called. Yeah, it's called. So when we actually call this setActive method, then there must be a problem in the service. And yeah, it's some wonky code, so I'm not surprised at all. But there might be some problem in here. Let's see. So getting the list should work. The current, we find the item with the ID. I think this should work too. The new item. Let's see how we call the update. Detective, this looks good as well, but here is the problem. So we actually want to set it inactive and not active because we are already in the list of active items. So we have to do it that way. Okay. But still doesn't work. Okay. I really hope this does work, but there is some other problem still. Yes, we need to use await here as well to get the correct list. Okay. Yeah. Now it works. Our test succeeds. So we can now click on an item. Like we can actually look at the real application. So you see we have the active items and we have the inactive items, and then we click an item and it moves it down here. Perfect. So now we want to move them in the opposite direction as well. And last but not least, we also want to add new items, but should be straightforward. So let's go to test again. And let's say should make an item active when an inactive item is clicked. And here we say add item to. Yeah, let's do it that way. So we could create a new precondition, and it would basically, maybe it would be the cleanest way to do it, so that we create a data set like this is the mock data set we use, and we could create a data set where we have one item with inactive. I guess it would be the cleanest way, but we can also do it like that. So let's add an item to active and then add item to inactive. I'm a little lazy today, so I do it that way. Add items. First of all, oh no, let's be not lazy because we can't really be sure that everything works correctly. So let's do it differently. Let's make the third item inactive. Save it now. Our first test fails, I guess. Yes, because we check here. If there is item 3, we remove it. And now we can do it that way. We can say add item 2 inactive, item 3, and then we assert item 3 to be visible. Now we have to implement this one as well. So let's go to the DSL. Add item to active. Let's copy this one. And let's say item to inactive, and it has the same implementation because we're looking for the text anyway. We could change this up to something like click item, and then it's generic. But yeah, I like it that way too, even though those are exactly the same implementations, but this might change at a later point because maybe at the later point the way how we make an item inactive is completely different from how to make it active. And if we, from the beginning, we have two methods, then we are flexible in the future. So I think that's fine. We also have to import it. So now, first, oh, it already works. It shouldn't work. Ah, yeah, because we need to assert items visible in this case, because there is some, yeah, there's actually this one needs to be add item to inactive, and this one needs to be add item to active, because the implementations are exactly the same. It doesn't matter that this still works, but yeah, otherwise it's confusing. So now the first two succeed still, like we expected, and the third one does not because we didn't implement the functionality, but it's straightforward now because we just need to do the opposite thing like that. Just copy the whole thing. Easier. So simply rename this one and this one. Add the method in here and also add the event listener above. That active, and it should work. Yeah. And now comes the refactoring again. So we see this is basically the same implementation. So I guess we can optimize it. So we can say like set date and then a second param here and use it. That we can remove this one. That one set state, and in here we can now use that date, and in here we use the. So if you don't know, that event is basically the value of the event itself, so that we can use it in here. So it's basically the same as if we would do something like that. So you can imagine it like that, but it's a shortcut, a helper basically. So we can use event, and the state in here is inactive, and down here it's active, and it should still work after those refactoring changes. Yeah, everything still works. Great. Okay, so let's take a look at our real app again. So we see that it really works. So because we changed the mock file, we now have an inactive item right from the start. We can click it, it moves up here, and we can move them around. So basically, you can imagine so you're sitting at home and you think of something you need to buy, you add it to your active items, and then you go to the shop, and when you are at the shop and you put item 1, like your milk or something like that, in your cart, you can click it, and then it's in the inactive items, and then you go further in the shop, and when you have all the stuff, then you know you are done. So like, yeah, a shopping list app. Okay. That's for the basic stuff. And now for adding a new one, let's do this also. And then talk a little bit about the RTC stuff again, because that's probably the more interesting stuff. So today you can see how we can work applying a TDD approach, and that doesn't have to be hard, and it can be very fast. I would say it's a very fast approach. But I guess it's somewhat boring watching me writing some code and looking at some tests. But yeah, I think working with WebRTC should be a lot more interesting. At least I hope so. So let's write a new test for adding stuff. So it should add a new item to the list of active items, something like that. Yeah, we still prepare the shopping list exists. We go to the shopping list page, and then I think we already have a DSL method for add new item. Exactly. So the add new item step types whatever item name we provide into a field, an HTML field with the label name. So we specify, instead of using some CSS class or some special data selector, we use the label of the field to select it. And we use the type method on the driver to type some value into the input field. And after typing the name into the input field with the label name, we click a button. So now we select the thing we want to interact with the role property. And we say we want to click something that is of the role button and has the name item. So that way, we also in some way test the accessibility of our application, because that way you can't do something evil like using a div or like a span to as a button. So you should always use a real button element, and by using this role selector, we make sure that it only works out, test only succeeds when a real button is used. And the button also has a name, because sometimes there are buttons without a name, which just show some icon or something like that. And that's also not accessible. So a button should be a button element with a valid name. So the name can be the text inside the button, or you can also provide a area, I don't know how to pronounce it, like an ARIR label. That's what I mean. So yeah, so in this case, the important stuff is we type the name into the name field and we click a button with the name add item. And we need to use this in our specification. So in here, instead of adding an existing item to the list of active items, we add new item, call it item 4, because I'm very creative. And then we assert items visible item 4. Like we add a new item and we assert that the new item is visible in the list of new items. So when we open our test again, our test runner again, we see the new test fails again, like we expected, like we are in the red phase again. So let's implement the functionality. And for now, let's do it very straightforward. Let's do it right in here in the shopping list app, because it's a very simple thing right now, and we always can improve it and make a separate component for this add form, but yeah, it's not. Right now, it's all very straightforward, and we don't need to make it more complicated than it is. So we need an input with a label, and the label is name. And we have the input here. We can use a name in here also, but that's not really important. But I guess we need a V model. How do we call it? Let's say item new name. Yeah, like I said, I'm not very creative today, but yes. And then we add the button, and the button, how do we call it? Add item makes sense. So button add item and add submit. That way we could add an event listener on the button, but I think it's cleaner to do it that way, although in a single page application it really doesn't matter to do it correctly, quote unquote correctly, but yeah, I'm an old school guy and I like to use forms with submit handlers. So submit prevent equals add item. Do it that way. Yeah, and create a new. Let's create a new method in here. Let's also call it, add item, of course. Add item and get the name here. And we need a new service method. Let's call it create. I think that makes sense. Create and like that. Name. Yeah, and also provide the state active. Then we are flexible. So I think that looks fine. And we do it again in the lazy way by simply refetching the list after the create succeeds. Let's add, let's do the add item in here. We need this create one. So first of all, import it from our service. And now let's go to our service and create a new function for create. Copy this one. I think we need some parts of it like that. Data again. We need the list here. And then we can do it a little bit. Yeah, we can just do it that way. List, push. Oh, and now we need an ID. I don't know how we do it. How we do the ID thing. Like that. And the ID. Maybe we don't need an ID. Because we only use, we need an ID. I mean, we could use the name as an ID, probably. Maybe, yeah, let's do it that way. Simply use the name as an ID and maybe some. Yeah, this breaks as soon as we add two items with the same name. But yeah, we should implement some error handling so that this isn't possible. So there should be some error handling or some validation that we can't create an item with the same name twice because it makes sense. But for now, let's leave it that way. And in here, we can do this a lot simpler. We can just stringify the list. I guess that looks good. And now save this one as well. Let's see. Yeah, okay, we need a ref for the, because we need a ref for, this is wrong. We need a ref for the new item name. Let's copy this one and create a new ref in here. New item name equals ref. Start with an empty string. And now we need to use that one in here, item name value. Okay, and we also need to return it in here. Let's see. Yeah, works. So now also adding new items works as well. Let's check it in the real browser. yeah, it's no styling at all, so it's a little bit hard to see. But now we have our name thing here, and now we can finally add our milk, and we can also add some chocolate, of course, and yeah, I don't know, stuff. Okay, so we can add new items, we can move items around like that. That's a little bit hard to see because of no styling at all, but I hope you get the basic functionality. So basic functionality works and everything is stored in the local storage. That's fine. I mean, now we're using mocking, so when I reload this, everything is as it was before because we use the mock also in our browser. I can show this real quick, like I think, no, it's not in the mount, it's in the main. In here, we load our precondition with the shopping list items. So this is the thing that for our test fills the local storage with some items so we can run the test. And we can also use this in our development build for faster development. But in this case, we don't want it to be recommented out. And when I reload now, it keeps the local storage. So it shows the 3 items because they already were in the local storage. But when I add a new item right now and I reload, then the item stays in here because now we are using the local storage and don't overwriting it. So if I add this again, the local storage is overwritten every time we reload because that's basically what the mocking layer does, what the preconditions do. Okay, so let's just for some, just to take a closer look what we did or what we achieved today. So we created a couple of tests. First of all, that the shopping list renders correctly, that we can mark an active item as inactive when we click the item, and the other way around, when we click an inactive item, we want to show it in the list of active items again, and we want to be able to add new items. And how this works in the real world is, when we are at home and we remember something we need, of course, vegetables, then we can add it to the list. And when we are in the shop, we can simply click it and it moves down and we know what items we already have in our cart, in the real shopping cart this time. And the next time we are at home again, we don't need to enter vegetables again because they're already here and we can just click it and add them again to the active items. Because with a shopping list, basically most of the time you always buy the same stuff. At least I do. Okay. And now, like I said before, that's all nice and cool. If you're a single like me, this already works perfectly fine because you're the only one who adds stuff and who removes stuff. But if you live with other people, because you are in a family or just have some roommate or something like that, then it's very, very useful to have a shopping list that can be accessed by multiple people. Multiple people can access the same shopping list. But as you saw, we use the local storage for storing this stuff. And the local storage obviously is local, like the name already, like it's already in the name, it's local. So it's only on our machine. So how can we share this with other people? And this will be the topic of the next stream because this stream is already over an hour and I don't want to make this too long. And at the beginning of this stream, I explained how we want to do it. So I repeat it real quick. We want to do it with WebRTC. Like WebRTC is usually when you're using something like Google Meet or it is called Hangouts now, I don't know, or some other web-based conference or meeting or chat software. I think they all, or at least most of them, are based on a technique called WebRTC. And WebRTC, what it does is, like, if you don't watch at the beginning, this is a smartphone, as you can obviously see. And this is also a smartphone or some device, doesn't matter. And what WebRTC does, it makes it possible that two devices can communicate directly with each other. So instead of having an API which talks to a database or some other data storage, or yeah, mostly a database probably, then this device would talk with the API and would register itself and say, yeah, we are this actor and the other actor, we are in the same family, and so we belong together. And so the API, when this device calls the API, it sends all the shopping list items of both of them. And so we can sync those devices via the API. But we want to remove the API. Oh, I want to remove this one and make those two talk directly to each other. And we can do this with WebRTC. And this will be the topic of the next stream, how we can use WebRTC to basically share data or sync data in a peer-to-peer way without having a server in between. Yeah, so that was it. And I hope you will tune in to the next stream. And last but not least, I do some advertising. So if you're interested in testing, then you can check out this Substack. Oh, I'm not logged in here. This Substack where I release new chapters of my book about how to write good tests. Each week I try to release 2 chapters each week, or 2 sections of a chapter each week. And yeah, there are already a couple of articles in here, and I'd love to see some of you subscribing to this to learn more about testing and how to write good tests. So how to use a system like you saw today in today's stream to write tests that are helping us to build software faster and more reliable, build more reliable software. Okay, so that was it. And I hope I will see you in the next stream again, which probably, I hope I can do another stream this week, maybe even tomorrow, but I'll let you know on Twitter, or if you subscribe to the channel, I think you will get an email. So I wish you a nice evening or a nice morning or whatever time zone you are in. And yeah, cheers.